Welcome back, everyone, to Pontos Fathom Press. This is our Pontos Fathom Podcast, episode number 62. And we're going to go back to the young John Milton and talk about the war of all against all. We're going to mention a little bit about Steiner and Nietzsche. We've got Rudolf Steiner's influences of Lucifer and Ahriman on the table. And I'm going to really focus on two poems written by John Milton. You can see some pictures of Milton at ages 62, 52, 36, 21. So it's a young, fresh-faced Milton, right? He wrote these two poems, which are almost like an exercise. One called L'Allegro, and the other one called Il Penseroso. L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. And they are quite interesting play of the young Milton. It's back in 1631. Young Milton's on vacation, John Milton, and he's playing with this concept. I'll read a little bit about this introduction. Maybe I'll just start out with the Milton piece, and then we'll kind of end it with some topics around the war of all against all. So the war of all against all is a Rudolf Steiner concept about. He talks about this rise of Ahriman. So we're going to talk about. Well, I guess we'll frame this in the sense of, if you think of Nietzsche, good and evil, and wrestling with what good and evil are, right? And then we think of the traditional Judeo-Christian world of the saintly versus the diabolical or the demonic. What Milton's going to take us to, and it's interesting how these are written well before he wrote Paradise Lost, which, by the way, as modern readers, we see Satan as almost the hero of Paradise Lost, right? He's sort of got an anti-hero. He's like the original anti-hero, right? This idea he's cast out of heaven. And the way Milton was trying to write him was very much so as the adversary. But you can't help but give it some kind of, there's some romanticism to it. And I think it inspired the Romantic Age. I think a lot of that comes out of this. But then when we look at this more evolved version of this post-Luciferian, post-Satan age of like Lucifer and Ahriman, I think Steiner really talks about how, I think he famously says the left half of the body will be fighting the right half of the body. And I thought that these two poems written by a young John Milton, there in the fresh early days of 1631, kind of frame this. So let's kind of go into it. It says, Allegro and Il Penseroso, written in Milton's last long vacation in 1631 when he was 22, or perhaps during the following summer. They are most felicitous lyrical products of the young poet's Johnsonian phase, which had begun with the epitaph on the Marchioness of Winchester, along with Johnson's classical symmetry, clarity, urbanity, and poems have refined a purity of vision, a delicacy of charm, of phrase, of tone, of rhythm, and they are beyond the master's reach. The structural line, contrasting the images of light and darkness, is provided by a pattern of an ideal day and an ideal night. Right, so one poem will be focusing on an ideal day, but you're going to see how he plays with it. I don't know if anyone knows the Dandy Warhols, but the Dandy Warhols have a song called Cool as Kim Deal. And it's got these turns of phrases in it that are brilliant. They say, "There's nothing in my heart. I'd rather be cool than be smart." And then the next line is, "Oh, what was I thinking of? I'd rather be cool than be loved." Right? So it's a play on which thought is coming from the heart, which thought is coming from the head. Right? What was I thinking of? I'd rather be cool than be loved. There's nothing in my heart. I'd rather be cool than be smart. Right? It's and I think that's the modern reductionist. After hearing that line, you can just stop watching the podcast. But if you want to keep going, let's jump into this. So he really is going to go through the differences between melancholy and mirth, right? These universal abstractions, mirth and melancholy. The later is really contemplation, especially of a Platonic cast. And the substance given through outdoor and indoor settings, in a variety of illusions, details are generalized and idealized. Milton's temperament was flexible enough to enable him to distill both states of mind, with mirth as well as with contemplation, So enjoying too much and thinking too much, maybe, are the thing. And this is why I put Nietzsche in there, because I thought of the Dionysian concept. So the critics have seen an initial suggestion in the verses prefixed to the third edition. But I really feel that this is something that he will explore more when you start to dig into Paradise Lost. So let's kind of go into this. I'll kind of read them, really. L'Allegro. Hence loathed melancholy of Cerberus in blackest midnight born, in Stygian cave forlorn, mongst horrid shapes and shrieks and sights unholy, find out some uncouth cell where brooding darkness spreads his jealous wings and the night raven sings. There under ebon shades and low-browed rocks, as ragged as thy locks, in dark Cimmerian desert ever dwell. But come, thou goddess fair and free, in heaven clipped Euphrosyne, by men heart-easing mirth, whom lovely Venus at birth with two sister graces more to ivory-crowned Bacchus bore, or whether, as some sagers sing, the frolic wind that breathes the spring, Zephyr with Aurora playing, as he met her once a-Maying, there on beds of violets blue, and fresh brown roses washed in dew, filled her with thee, a daughter's fair, so buxom, blithe, and debonair. Haste thee, nymph, and bring with thee jest and youthful jollity, quips and cranks, and wanton wiles, nods and becks and wreathed smiles, such as hang on Hebe's cheek, and love to live in dimples sleek. Sport that wrinkled care decides, and laughter holding both his sides. Come and trip it as ye go on the light fantastic toe, and in thy right hand lead with thee the mountain nymph, sweet Liberty. And if I give thee honor due, Mirth, admit me thy crew, to live with her and live with thee, in unproved pleasures free, to hear the lark begin its flight, and singing startle the dull night, from his watchtower in the skies, till the dappled dawn doth rise, and then to come in spite of sorrow, and at my window bid good morrow, through the sweet briar or the vine, or the twisted eglantine, where the cock with lively din scatters the rear of darkness thin, and to the stack of the barn door stoutly struts this dame's before, oft listening how the hounds and horn cheerily rouse the slumbering morn, and from the side of some hoar hill, through the high wood echoing shrill, sometime walking not unseen by hedgerow elms on hillocks green, right against the eastern gate, where the great sun begins his state, robed in flames and amber light, the clouds in thousand liverlies delight, where the ploughman near the hand, whistling over the furrowed land, and the milkmaid singeth blithe, and the mower whets his scythe, and every shepherd tells his tale under the hawthorn in the dale. Straight mine eye hath caught new pleasures, whilst the landscape round it measures, russet lawns and fallows grey, where the nibbling flocks do stray, mountains on whose barren breast the labouring clouds do often rest, meadows trim with daisies pied, shallow brooks and rivers wide, towers and battlements at seas bosomed high in tufted trees, where perhaps some beauty lies, the cynosure of neighbouring eyes, hard by a cottage chimney smoke, from betwixt two aged oaks, where cordon and thyrsus meet at the savoury dinner of herbs and other country messes, where the neat-handed Phyllis dresses, and then in haste her bough she leaves, with Thessaly to bind the sheaves, or the earlier season lead to the tanned haycock in the mead. Sometimes with secure delight the upland hamlets will invite, when merry bells ring round and the jocund rebecks sound, to many a youth and many a maid dancing in the checkered shade, and young and old come forth to play on a sunshine holiday, to the livelong daylight fail, then to the spicy nut-brown ale, with stories told of many a feast, how fairy Mab the junkets eat. She was pinched in pull, and she said, and he by friar's lantern led. Tells how the drudging goblin sweat to earn his cream bowl duly set, when in one night, ere glimpsed the morn, his shadowy flail hath threshed the corn, that 10-day labourers could not end,
Then lies him down the lubber fiend, and stretched out all the chimney's length, basks in the fire his hairy strength, and crop full out of doors he flings, ere the first cock his matin rings. Thus done the tales to bed they creep, by whispering winds soon lulled asleep. Towered cities please us then, and the busy hum of men, where throngs of knights and barons bold, in weeds of peace and high triumphs hold, with stores of ladies whose bright eyes rain influence, and judge the prize of wit or arms, while both contend to win her grace, who all commend. There let Hymen oft appear in saffron robe, with taper clear, and pomp and feast and revelry, with mask and antique pageantry, such sights as youthful poets dream on summer's eves by haunted stream. Then to the well-trod stage anon, if Johnson's learned sock be on, or sweetest Shakespeare, fancy's child, warble his native wood notes wild. And ever against eating cares lap me in soft Lydian airs, married to immortal verse, such as the meeting soul may pierce in note, a many a winding bout of linked sweetness long drawn out, with wanton heed and giddy cunning, the melting voice through mazes running, untwisting all the chains that tie the hidden soul of harmony, that Orpheus's self may heave his head from golden slumber on a bed of heaped Elysian flowers, and hear such strains as would have won the ear of Plato, to have quite set free his half-regained Eurydice. These delights, if thou canst give, mirth with thee, I mean to live. So we start out here with mirth, and he goes through all of these joys, right? And he kind of contrasts it between the day and the night. And then he turns right around. And the thing is, you have to read these as bookends, because all of the conceits, all of the forms, he will now mirror them to the opposite side. So we just had the free of mirth. Now we're going to go to contemplation, Il Penseroso. Hence, vain deluding joys, right? So we started out before, we said, hence loathed melancholy. So melancholy is loathed in Allegro, but now joy is deluding in Il Penseroso, right? So I won't do that for all of them, but you're going to kind of see this back and forth. And we will get to Saturn here. Hence vain deluding joys, the brood of folly without father bred. How little you bestead, or fill the fixed mind with your toys. Dwell in some idle brain, and fancies fond with gouty shapes possess, as thick and numberless as the gay notes that people the sunbeams, or likest hovering dreams, the fickle prisoners of Morpheus' train. But hail, thou goddess sage and holy, hail, divinest melancholy, whose saintly visage is too bright to hit the sense of human sight, and therefore to our weaker view, overlaid with black, staid wisdom hue. Black, but in such esteem, Prince Memnon's sister might beseem, or that the starred Ethiop queen that strove to set her beauty's praise above the sea nymphs, and their powers offended. And yet thou art high, far descended. Thee, bright-haired Vesta, long of yore, the solitary Saturn bore. His daughter she in Saturn's reign, she mixed. Such mixture was not held a stain. Oft in glimmering bowers and glades he met her, in secret shades of woody Ida's inmost groves, while yet there was no fear of Jove. Come, pensive nun, devout and pure, sober, steadfast and demure, all the robe of darkest grain, flowing with majestic train, and stable stole of cypress lawn, over the deceit shoulders drawn. Come, but keep thy wonted state, with even step and musing gait, and looks commencing with the skies, thy rapt soul sitting in thine eyes. Three held in holy passion still, forget thyself to marble, till with a sad leaden downward cast thou fix them on the earth as fast, and join with thee calm peace and quest, spare fast and off with gods doth diet, and here's the muse in a ring, I round about Jove's altar sing, and add to these retired leisure, and in trim gardens take his pleasure. But first, the chiefest, with thee bring him that yon soars on golden wing, guiding the fiery wheeled throne, the cherub contemplation, and the mute silence hissed along. Let Philomel, who deign a song in her sweetness saddest plight, soothing the rugged brow of night, while Cynthia cheeks her dragon's yoke, gently over the accustomed oak. Sweet bird that shuntest the noise of folly, most musical, most melancholy. Three chantress off the woods among, I woo to hear thy evensong. And missing there I walk unseen on the dry, smooth, shaven green, to behold the wandering moon, riding near her highest noon, like one who had been led astray through the heaven-wide pathless way. And oft, as if her head she bowed, stooping through a fleecy cloud, oft on a plat of rising ground, I hear the far-off curfew sound. Over some stone-watered shore, swinging slow with sullen roar, or if the air will not permit, some still removed place will fit, where glowing embers through the room teach light to a counterfeit, a gloom. Far from all resort and mirth, save the cricket in the hearth, or the bellum's drowsy charm to bless the door from nightly harm. Or let my lamp at midnight hour be seen in some high lonely tower, where I may oft outwatch the bear and thrice great Hermes, or unsphere the great Plato, to unfold what worlds or what vast regions hold the immortal mind that hath forsook her mansions in this fleshy nook, and all those demons that are fond in air, fire, flood, or underground, whose power hath a true consent with planets or with element. Sometimes let gorgeous tragedy in sceptred pall come sweeping by, presenting Thebes or Pelops' line, or the tale of Troy divine, or what though rare of latter age embold hath the buskard state. But O sad virgin, that thy power might raise Munessus from his bower, or bid the soul of Orpheus sing. Such notes as warbled to the string drew iron tears down Pluto's cheek, and make hell grant what love did seek, or call upon him that left half told the story of Cambuscan bold, of Campbell, and of Algersife, and who had won Canast to wife, and owned the virtuous ring and glass, and the wondrous horse of brass, of which the Tartar king did raid, and of aught else great bards beside in sage and solemn tombs have sung, of tourneys, of towers, of trophies hung, of forests and encampments drear, where more is meant than meets the ear. Thus, night, oft see me in thy pale career, till civil suited morn appear, not tricked and frounced as she was wont with the Attic boy to hunt, with kerchief in a comedy cloud, while rocking winds are piping loud, or ushered with the shower still, when the gust hath blown his fill, ending in the rustling leaves, with minute drops from off the eaves. And when the sun begins to fling his flaring beams, me, goddess, bring to arched walks of twilight groves, and shadows brown with sylvan loves, of pine or monumental oak, where the rude axe hath heavy stroke, was never heard the nymphs to daunt, or fright them with their hallowed haunt. There in close covert by some brook, where no profaner eye may look, hide me from the day's garish eye, while the bee with honeyed thigh, that her flowery work doth sing, and the waters murmuring with such consort as they keep, entice the dewy feathered sleep, and let some strange mysterious dream wave at his wings an airy stream of lively portraiture displayed, softly on my eyelids laid. And as I wake, sweet music breathe above, about, or underneath, sent by some spirits to mortal good, or thy unseen genius of the wood. But let my dew feet never fail to walk the studious cloisters pale, and love the high embowered roof, with antique pillars massy proof, and storied windows richly delight, casting a dim religious light. And let the pealing organ blow to the full voice choir below, in service high and anthems clear, as may the sweetness through mine ear dissolve me into ecstasies, and bring all heaven before my eyes. And may at last my weary age find out the good peaceful hermitage, the hairy gown and mossy cell, where I may sit and rightly spell of every star that heaven doth shew, and every herb that sips the dew, the old experience do attain to something like prophetic strain. These pleasures melancholy give, and I with thee will choose to live.
Wow. Okay, so here we have it, right?
So he's kind of gone through point by point. He's taking one view, which is, what are we doing with all this contemplation, right? We could just be enjoying all of these, and each nymph has a different charm, right? The nymphs of the water, the mountain, the wood, right? The pleasures of these pastoral scenes, the pleasures of ales and meats and foods, the things that the day brings, right? And then it sort of laughs and scoffs at these pensive things, these thoughtful things, right? Allegro. Il Penseroso does the opposite. It says, what is all of this daylight stuff that everyone's involved with? All of these pleasures. The real pleasure, he says, is contemplating melancholy, right? It's not under the garishness of sunlight. It's in that moonlight where our lamps are set, beside our books, something like this, right? And he even calls out Saturn here. He talks about Saturn. He talks about the nuns, devoutness, but it's an evening prayer kind of nun, right? And then we talk about the muses of peace and quiet, the muses of darkness, the starry skies, how the illumination is within our thinking, not without, right? And I think that this is a great place. And I think the young Milton was obviously just playing with his craft a bit here. And he was also, though, expressing a bit of cheekiness, right? He's kind of being pretty cheeky because the poem that's called Penseroso is actually a bit more playful in its jabbing at the goods of the day. And the one that's called Allegro is a bit more studied in its way of saying, don't think too much. Just enjoy the fruits of the earth. And I think this is an amazing early stage of Milton that we could get into later if we go through Paradise Lost. But this is an early stage of Milton, just pulling in everything. He's pulling in Shakespeare, he's pulling in Ben Jonson, he's pulling in all of his craft, he's pulling in Greek mythology, Chaucer. So many things get pulled in here. And so, what does this have to do with the war of all against all? Well, I want to pull out this quote here from Bataille on Nietzsche. So this is a book of observations by Bataille during German occupation in France. And he's sort of reading some Nietzsche. He's reading from Nietzsche. Maybe we'll just start here. A certain emperor would think constantly of the instability of all things. Not to attach too much importance and to stay calm. Instability has a very different effect on me, and things seem infinitely more valuable to me on account of impermanence. It seems to me the most valuable vices, most exquisite balms, have always tossed into the sea. This is from Nietzsche. Suddenly clear sky, soon covered with black clouds. Few books give me as much pleasure as The Sun Also Rises. A sort of resemblance between Kay and Brett worries me at the same time. Rereading the Fiesta season, my tears overcame me. There's still something missing in the book's abhorrence of intellectual forms. I'd rather throw up such dietary abstinence. Doesn't much appeal to me. This morning, a harsh sky. My eyes see, or rather, lacerate it. The ancient cloud being and I know each other. We gauge each other, and we even enter each other's bones. As a result, interpenetrating each other, going deeply too much into the other. We turn into thin air, annihilating each other. Only emptiness is left. Nothing that resembles the whites of the eyes. So, I kind of call this out, and he also calls out this thing here. He says, For each given person, chance is communication and loss into another person. Communication is a continuity of that loss. If, on the other hand, the anguish continues like Proust, the individual has to rediscover time or agreement with time. For each person given is a chance to communicate and a loss with another person. Will I manage to discover the light-hearted, somewhat deranged, subtly analytical tone of voice that lets me retell the stories of the dance around time? Thus spake Zarathustra, and the remembrance of things past. Mean-spirited, persistent as a fly, I persistently note there is no wall between eroticism and mysticism. And it's really quite funny, since they use the same words, deal in the identical images, and they refuse to recognize it. Abhorring bodily pollutions, face distorted with hatred. Mysticism hypostasis the fear that contorts it. This fear is the positive object engendered by and perceived by the movement it calls God. Appropriately, the weight of the operation rests undiscussed. It's a juncture point, let's say an abyss. Okay, so why I'm bringing that in. So the idea here is within, there's a conflict within, right? And Milton sort of portrays this as two external poems, but they're actually two sides of our mood, right? So when we go into this influences of Lucifer and Ahriman, just the lecture quickly says, human beings are dwellers in two worlds. Our uniqueness amongst the creatures of the earth lies in this role that we have been half beast and half angel. A dynamic tension exists because of the contrary's demand, which living in each of these realms places upon us. We experience this on a daily basis, an internal tug of war, right? So here we have enjoying l'allegro, or the merits of Il Penseroso, right? Is the joy actually the melancholy? Are the joys melancholic? What is this conflict, right? Why was Bataille wrestling with this stuff, right? You know? Why are we all? And it says, the dynamic tension exists because of the contrary demands which living in each of these realms places upon us. We experience this on a daily basis. An internal tug of war, pulling first in one direction and then in the opposite direction. Wherever we are called upon to make a choice, a decision, the earthly and heavenly draw us one way or the other, and often both at once. A long-hold view has been that, of course, one should always give way to the heavenly or the spiritual. The alternative is to succumb to the earthly, the fallen, to evil. The struggle has been portrayed as white versus black, as good versus evil. The enduring legacy of this attitude has been to deem the unearthly bodily nature of the human being as soiled, unclean, corrupt, shameful. With this view, the spiritual aspirant of the past had no choice but to reject the body, the earth. In India, incarcerated into a physical body has long been considered a cure, the entering into the vale of tears which constitutes life, you know? I don't belong here, right? Like that kind of thing. Radiohead's Creep, right? That kind of sentiment. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here, right? The physical body was especially singled out for punishment, to be starved and tortured, perjured and scourged. St. Francis derided his body as his donkey, but reluctantly acknowledged he must give it some care. The medieval Cathars saw the human body as a pit into which the devil had lured the souls of weakened angels. Procreation was looked upon with horror and with an act of unwitting cruelty. So suspect was the physical body that Leonardo needed secrecy to dissect corpses, the accumulation of an inordinate amount of the material realm in the form of wealth that has been rather suspect. Such views have persisted on varying levels into modern times, not just among the puritanical or the late Victorian. It says, Sigmund Freud had difficulty as a scientist in acknowledging the angelic side of the patients. He reframed the conflict as one involving human bodily nature and probably superstitious religious and moral beliefs that maintain this wrestling match between the instinctual id and the moralistic superego. Later psychologists say like the opposing forces paving the way for the discovery of one's unifying center. So this is like the self in the Jungian concept, right? Similarly, Carl Jung described the marriage of eros and logos within the soul, sometimes alchemically participating in the soul. And Rudolf Steiner's The Representation of Humanity Lucifer is portrayed as an exceedingly handsome and powerfully winged form. Despite his having fallen from heaven, he was nevertheless an angel, a leader of angels. As the light bearer, he was particularly gifted for humankind, especially that of wisdom, when he first offered it to Adam and Eve. By their eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, Lucifer promised that they would be of gods. Like Icarus, they were not yet prepared for such a gift and ignored warnings of the contrary and accepted it and fell from paradise. Is this example should be noted that the gift in and of itself is not evil. In the earlier psychological examples, neither the heavenly nor the earthly is itself to be seen as absolutely desirable or absolutely forbidden. The beings of the polarities actually have something of value to offer humanity. This is the very difference from the traditional view of the devil's offerings. However, in the individual, we must inwardly prepare for the reception of these gifts. The hallucinogenic drug user is open to receiving luciferic light and often feels quite wise while in the midst of the drug experience. Without the mediative discipline of the serious student of the spirit, however, the contact with these realms is barely beneficial and in fact can be quite harmful. In this century, society is especially interested in the material. And he goes into the idea of this Ahriman. The influence of Ahriman has grown through the centuries, quietly gaining respectability in the age of the Renaissance over the last years. There's been a serious question of the notion that the only reality is the physical one. For the most part, the realm of soul and spirit has been dismissed. And he goes off about, going off in this introduction about the Ahrimanic nature. But when we get to Steiner's writings himself, starts to talk about this battle of all against all. So the idea is the left hand will be fighting the right hand. So you've got the Luciferic kind of influence, which is more of genius, and it's more of ego, and it's more of like light in the sense of it's illuminating. Even the scientific age can be seen as having a Luciferian impact. The Ahrimanic side, however, is more like the rise of, I think the word diabolical comes more into play with the Lucifer side. But with the Ahriman side, you get this more of a demonic side. And with demonic, you have to have an awareness of a more subtle malaise, let's call it. It's like a malaise. It's the grinding down, being dragged down by the stone, right? Becoming a cog in a machine where you don't have any agency, right? And this being slowly pulled into something that you didn't want to be pulled into, and then just through momentum, you find yourself under these Ahrimanic influences. So now just in this, you can sort of see the spiritual battle, kind of like referencing back to, is it really good or evil? It's more like what do you do with the fruit of the tree of knowledge, right? So the idea here with young John Milton, what he did was he wrote 2 poems in an early experiment of craft and sentiment and framing some of his own personal thoughts, bridging Christian thinking, Greek and Roman thinking, and contemporary thinking, melding them all together in these beautiful poems that serve as devices, the good angel and the bad angel, let's call them, right? Sitting on one shoulder. With the war of all against all, there's a similar thing. You could think of it as your time away from the digital and your time in the real world. Like how much of your time are you spending in the digital world? Those can be the polarity that you're fighting. So I think the idea of the left hand of the body fighting the right hand of the body is something that has to be, we'll use the Jungian term, integrated, right? Or it's something that if we use the term of all against all, it's and in the term of, say, our young John Milton here, he goes on to write A Paradise Lost, in where he does sort of show the point of view of the humans before the fall, how they were enjoying bliss in this blissful garden. And then with knowledge, they started having knowledge of their nakedness. They started having the knowledge of good and evil. Before they were like beasts. They just didn't know there was a good and evil. But once they named them, now they had to wrestle with it. And so the naming of these things, whether it's Il Penseroso and Il Allegro, or the war of all against all, the naming of this, Nietzsche writes a lot about this beyond good and evil concept, where he points to like one of his evils is pity, He thinks pity is not the same as compassion, right? Compassion is the bodhisattva version of pity, right? Compassion is where you relate to the other person's struggle, right? You make their struggle something that you can interface with. But with pity, it's a judgment. It's a down. Pity has a connotation to it. So this is where this wrestling, and let's call it this human responsibility, was something that Steiner sort of seems to believe in, right? The human responsibility. What do I do? With this gift of imprisonment in a archon-driven world, right? What do I do with this gift of being embodied? Even in John, I believe there's the body is the temple of the soul, right? So what kinds of things do you want to be doing with it? These are up to you. But then there's these kind of markers. There's these markers that you can set up. I think what was nice about Milton's creating the two towers of Penseroso and Allegro, he makes it very external. And then he realizes that in the real life, though, these are happening within. Eve takes the fruit, right? We'll see later in Paradise Lost, Eve takes the fruit. Adam is forced to have the knowledge also of good and evil. They have to take the consequences of consorting with the satanic knowledge of good and evil, right? And I think, though, when we strip away some of these names, it's just more like an observation problem, a contrast problem, and it's like soul work. Like, what's your mission here, right? This book says the human responsibility for the earth. So yeah, I'll kind of leave it for you all. That's where we'll end it. Let me know if you want me to do more of these John Milton ones. I could do a Paradise Lost one. These are quite good. It's just mixing it up a bit. Go check out our Patreon below and check out our bookstore. As you guys know, lots of stuff there to see. We've got the series that's most like this lecture would probably be the Katsu Journals out of Lovecraft's Providence. We've got our Dune and Anthroposophy and Alchemy book, and we've got our Artificial Intelligence book with psychology. So go check those out. Check the links below and like and subscribe here. Leave your comments below, and thank you for your support. Talk to everyone soon. Bye-bye.